Hello, everyone, and welcome to Zero Effort Game Reviews. And I am here to review Sekiro-Shadows Die Twice. I have literally just finished my stream and Defeat Edition with a good ending. So, it's one of those games that it's not the first time I played it. Story is that I had a PS4, borrowed the game from a friend, and then some rat bastard stole my PS4, so I haven't finished it. And then I wanted to finish it, so I literally re-bought a PlayStation to play Bloodborne and Sekiro, and for Sekiro to finish it. And today, after like what 5 years, I finally actually got to finish the game. And yeah, I just want to preface: I am a huge FromSoft fan, so there is a heavy amount of bias. So I would just like to say, yeah, it's a masterpiece to me. It is full of flaws, like a lot of FromSoft games, but I still it's one of like my favorite games, and although I'm not a huge guy that usually plays NG Plus games, I will probably play NG Plus. So yeah, to start off, visuals and art direction. It's Japan. It's feudal Japan, where like the warring nations are happening, and it's set in a place called Ashina, where this guy, their people like were suffering for a long time, and this guy literally comes up, sword saint, and absolutely fucking shits on everyone, and raises up a cool city. And then the rest of Japan's just like nah. And then there's mix bits and pieces of like fantasy, like headless dudes that like to steal your soul out of your ass. I'm not even fucking with you. That's like legitimately a thing. Dragons and like immortal blades and apes that fight you with samurai swords and zombies. It's like feudal Japan with a lot of yokai and cool stuff. A lot of the scenes or like the levels, beautiful because you're a ninja. There's a lot of areas that like the level designs are scaled very quickly, so you can like latch onto stuff. So it's a very beautiful game to play. And honestly, sometimes I just like to like stand instead of the maps and just absorb the stuff. It's like a lot of FromSoft games. It's beautiful yet chilling because there's usually piles of corpses or burning things, and then you'll go to a place where it's incredibly serene and beautiful, like the heaven area. But yeah, in terms of visuals and art direction, it's a FromSoft game. It's not like the most best thing or like best thought out, but it's still really pretty and nice to look at. So it's really solid there. Um, in terms of story and characters, it's a FromSoft game. They usually tell a lot of the story through item descriptions, which usually is my greatest weakness. But unlike a lot of the other FromSoft games, Sekiro actually tells you the story pretty consistently up front, and the characters actually tell you a lot of the story pretty up front. So it is actually one of the most straightforward and easiest to understand stories of FromSoft games to date that you don't actually have to Google the wiki to understand. I won't go into too much detail. It's functionally you have like four endings where you can choose to save your master or follow the shinobi code and follow your father and steal and then become a like a god of war, which is not the good ending. Or your guy like your master dies, and then or your master gets saved, or your master dies and then his body is absorbed into a little child, and then you go try to return the dragon blood that the your master has. As you can tell from like me just briefly going on about it, if you haven't experienced Japanese games, it's just a lot of what the fuck did you just tell me? So it's just that. I'm not a guy that plays Sekiro for the storyline, but I will say one of the elements in it is that like the eavesdropping mechanic that you can actually listen to snippets was actually a really cool thing. It's more of a gameplay aspect, but the fact that you can hear what a lot of the NPCs or enemies are talking about, like in terms of even like, oh yeah, we put armor on this guy, but like I'm pretty sure it'll come off really easily. And those sort of small snippets actually told you a lot about what the game was, like bosses and potential stories, or like where to go, which I thought was a really cool way of actually telling the story, like eavesdropping in on enemies talking about the actual world around you, which I thought was cool. In terms of music and sound design, music is just classic, like just classic FromSoft. It's not amazing. Bloodborne is one of those games that has like an amazing soundtrack. Sekiro is not, I wouldn't call amazing. It's good. I wouldn't call it functional, but it's kind of like functional, but it's good. It's solid. There was never a moment that I was just like, oh my god, this soundtrack is making me hype. It's mostly cool. But what they did excel is the sound design. When you do stuff like death blows, and which I'll go into more description later, and when you're latching on to stuff and the or when you're like clashing your katanas together and the ching ching ching, ching, like they nailed it in that respect. So the combat in this game feels so viscerally satisfying. Not to mention because your controller shakes in your hand, but because of the sound. And the sound design was so well thought out that to some extent, when you're fighting bosses, it's not even like like it's not even a fight. It's like a rhythm game, where you're listening to the ting ting tong. Oh, like oh, it's a tong. So you like try to retaliate. Really cool. Some of the best. Like the reason why Bloodborne and Sekiro is like one of my favorite, like two favorite like FromSoft games to date is because of their usage of sound design in combat is just so viscerally satisfying when you defeat your enemies. So on that note, let's go into the gameplay breakdown. Combat is incredibly fun, and as I probably had snippets like beforehand. It's a flip between Bloodborne or me for this, and like what's the best combat. But I won't go too much into Bloodborne because I keep on bringing it in. But it's like it's difficult to not kind of compare to Bloodborne with Sekiro because Sekiro and Bloodborne were kind of developed at the same period of time, so a lot of their concepts kind of intertwined with each other, which was a cool thing. Um, so yeah, actually, one more thing I would like to add, like it actually is kind of gameplay. FromSoft does have a tendency to reuse their assets, and I would say that how they reuse their assets in this game was amazing. Like you get to the castle, you beat it, and then later on castle is under siege by ninjas, which changes the like mob layouts, which actually makes the mid game of like going around the castle really interesting. And then the end is a huge wall because a different rival Japanese faction comes in and starts killing everyone, but like it's just war everywhere. So you see ninjas and samurai fighting against each other. So they're reusing the same area with different like lighting and stuff like that, or like same bosses. But it's one of those games where the reusage of the assets was done so well that I didn't care. And then when I noticed it, I was like, that's smart, not lazy. Sekiro is one of those rare occurrences where like I generally do think the reusage of assets was done so smart that I really want to like put a note on that. I really like how they reutilize the bosses. And it kind of ties into the idea that because the combat is so viscerally satisfying, unlike other FromSoft games, there's a lot of tendencies that FromSoft games, a lot of people complain that it's too difficult or too hard. But there is a difficulty scaling, and the difficulty is whether or not you go melee or magic or ranged and all that sort of stuff, right? In Sekiro, you don't have that option. You gotta get good with your katana. You gotta get good with the timing of deflections of attacks when perilous attacks, which I'll go into a little bit later, and like how to like plan your death blow trajectory while you're fighting multiple enemies. You need to get good at this game. So when they reuse assets, at the beginning when you fight a certain boss and you die to him continuously, and then you beat him, the elation that you feel is amazing. And then later on when you find the same guy, usually like in a game like Elden Ring where you have to fight the same thing over and over again, at least this does up to 2 or 3 times, but instead I feel an immense amount of satisfaction and power because I can easily defeat this guy and it feels good because unlike in a game like Elden Ring from Bloodborne or Dark Souls, it has nothing to do with my weapons. It's just because I have gotten better as a player. And that's where I feel like Sekiro really nailed it. It is one of those difficult games where unless you fully embrace yourself into the gameplay and the game design, you can't enjoy the game. But if you do, it's one of the most rewarding experiences that you can have in a video game, in my personal opinion. So yeah, to go into more detail about perilous attacks though, sorry if I'm shotgunning. It's just all of these like thoughts are in my head. Perilous attacks are functionally this game's version of paper scissors rock. So I'd actually compare Sekiro to a game like a match of boxing, and I get the same amount of satisfaction out of a boxing match or a like kickboxing match with an actual opponent, but none of the brain damage or the physical exertion outside of your blood pumping. Because how combat usually works is you hit, they block, you hit, and sometimes they do a swing that you can't block with your hit. And once again, this is all tied into the sound design, so you can kind of tell. And then you have to deflect, and if you deflect correctly and you attack correctly, their posture bar and your posture bar starts increasing. If your posture bar gets too much, you stagger, and then they can do massive damage to you. If you break their posture, they become open and you can do a death blow to them. And once again, the soundbite for like the death blows are mwah. And when you do that through multiple like swarms of people, like I can't express how much of a visceral satisfaction that is. But yeah, outside of like that, like different sort of attack waves, there'll come a perilous sign where you can't actually block it. So it's either a thrust, where later on you can learn a Mikiri counter, where you can time a dodge inwards, where you can step on their thrust and do massive amounts of posture damage, or they'll do a sweep, which you can't block, so you have to jump over it. And then you can learn a technique where you can just jump on their heads to do posture damage, or they'll do a grab attack, which you have to kind of dodge, but because it's long lunging, you can actually get a hit in after you dodge it, or a lightning attack where you have to jump up, get hit by it, and then swing like the lightning into the enemy before you hit the ground. So that's the thing. You wind up more than any FromSoft game, in my opinion, while you're doing the combat, you are honing in on the moveset of the enemy because you are looking for the perilous attack. Because this game has such a strong focus on the animation and like focusing on what the animation is to counter it, that you become a master at fighting and you feel like you're an actual ninja, like learning how to do combat. So when you're doing a one-on-one fight, which a lot of like the combat experience or like the bosses are one-on-one fight, you see a this and then a switch, you're like, oh, he's coming for a sweep, and then you jump, or you see a and he's gonna do a like a thrust, and you're like, oh shit, I have to prepare for a Mikiri counter. So that's kind of like boxing, right? You're like doing this, and he's dropping his like right hand. He's a jab, and then he has this like wind up. And oh no, he's going for a straight, and then the counter like move. Like this game feels like I'm doing a boxing match, and I love boxing, and I love like martial arts and stuff like that. But with my age and my lack of brain damage, this is like the closest thing that I can get to that level of satisfaction and excitement outside of probably combat games. But like I don't know, I just never really got into them. So yeah. So that's one aspect. There are shinobi tools and combat arts. I will say they are kind of like a fun addition, but I do have a bit of a gripe with them. And the gripe is that when you have things called gourds, and gourds basically, the more gourd seeds you get more heals, and then you can make the heals better, and you can like kill more people, get prayer beads, so you can increase your vitality, all these sort of things, right? But to use combat arts or shinobi tools and all these sort of things, which are like cool things like shurikens and axes and flamethrowers, or like an umbrella that blocks all things, which is actually one of the most broken fucking items in the game, and I absolutely love it. But yeah, they have that, but it's used based off like you have to have these like paper tool things, and you get like 15, and you can level it up so you can get like 18. I really don't like the fact that you have to gather them. It wasn't a problem for me because I was just focusing purely on the combat, and that might be a actual game design decision to kind of throw it in to help players use it. But what I wound up realizing is that 9 times out of 10, using these prosthetic tools don't actually really help unless it's like a direct counter to a certain enemy type. Most enemies you can all defeat with your sword, and you just learn to be. It's the game kind of forces you to be better with that sword. So, but the thing is that you give the players the option to have all these cool, fun tools, but like a lot of people when they're using their shurikens and doing all this fun stuff, halfway through like a level, they can't use it anymore because they run out. And what they say, oh yeah, once you rest at a bonfire or like a sculptor, idle, you can regain them. But the issue I find is that for me it's not a problem. But I have talked to a lot of people where they run out and then they have to farm to use some of the weapons and items. So I personally feel like the spirit emblems should also have just been a rechargeable thing instead of a gather thing. But that's more of an aspect like that I believe. Also, camera angles are usually the biggest reason why a person dies. Like you'll fight and then your vision will be blocked because the arena or you're fighting something too big and then you just have a huge fucking view of their ball sack in front of you and you're like, I can't see the attack animation, and then you just get blasted and you're like, okay, thank you, FromSoft. So it's one of those things that you just really, really don't like. AI is actually quite stupid a lot of the times, but it's kind of like the charm. It's like a Skyrim sort of thing. They'll see you. They're like, "Is that you?" You'll walk over to the side, and they're like, "Nah, I didn't see anything." Or you'll kill a friend, and he's like, "Huh," and then go over to the side, and then he's like, "Nah, we're gonna be fine," and then you just go back and stick and kill him. But a lot of people didn't like that. I personally, I find it to be fun because like screwing with AI is actually really, really good. Another thing I didn't like, Dragon Rot. I don't exactly know the reason why they implemented this system in, because like the more you die, a dragon rot sort of like thing occurs. So people start dying, and if they die, well, you can't use them in your missions anymore, and you don't get unseen aid, which basically if you die, you lose gold and you lose experience. But if you get unseen aid, you that doesn't happen. The thing that I found kind of annoying is that dragon rot occurs and then your NPCs die, and all you really have to do is spend 180 gold, get a cure, and cure the dragon rot. So it's like, hey, stop dying, and it's just like a reminder to stop dying, and it's just an extra level of tedium for no reason. And if you don't really care about it, the NPCs just die, which I felt like it was a little bit of a not a bad mechanic, but a bit of a dumb implementation. I personally just wasn't a fan of it. And the fact that like I played through the first playthrough, right? And I killed nearly everything. I didn't even unlock half the skill tree. By the end game, when you're trying to like do stuff, it's a bit of a pity because I understand. Like once again, I love this game because the base combat where you're just hitting things with a katana, deflecting, and doing the paper scissors rock. That boxing match is one of the most funnest gameplay systems I've ever experienced in my life. Love that shit. But the fact that ninja tools and skills where you use all the cool stuff is basically like you can't use it enough. Like some of the cool skills, like they use 7 spirit emblems. And once again, I want to reiterate that you have 15 at the beginning. So you use the skill twice and then you can't use it anymore. So why put all this cool stuff in and then you just bar the player from using it? And I feel like it was a huge oversight. I do get that probably they were like, we don't want players to use this too much because then the game will become too easy. But I'm like, why take that choice away? At least make it rechargeable so people can choose when to use it. It's just, yeah, it was a big gripe in my it didn't affect me the most, but I did see that when I wanted to do additional playthroughs and experimentation, I just never cared about any of the tools or the things because at the end of the day, I just wanted to get good with the blade in itself. Man, do I sound like a weeb. So yeah. Um Also, I would have to say from the FromSoft series, this has some of the best like 1v1 player versus personoid type boss fights in the game. Genichiro is great, Lady Butterfly is great, Ishin was amazing to fight. They were difficult, but defeating those bosses felt so good. Out of all of the Dark Souls on the FromSoft games, I have not felt the amount of satisfaction that I have as much as Sekiro. It is such a good game. It's like a rhythm game mixed with paper scissors rock that feels like an actual combat simulator. And if you lose your cool, you die because you're not paying attention to what the enemy is doing. Yeah. Oh, and finally, I there's 2 things that I kind of want to talk about. There's a thing where if you die, you can resurrect, which kind of ties in with the dragon rot. I love the resurrection mechanic because it gives you a chance once you die regain your composure and try again. And I love that. I just wish that it wasn't tied to the dragon rope mechanic because I really didn't like it because it just felt like tedious and dumb and just feels like, oh, okay, now I feel bad. People are dying because I suck, you know? Which I get is what like FromSoft loves to do, make you feel bad, and then like every good character just dies around you. But then it's like, can you just take out the dragon rope? I don't really see a point. And I will say when you kill a certain AI, the other AI will immediately stop and start backing off. Or if they do an attack after they finish and you go through an invincibility frame, they'll back off. So weirdly enough, this game, regardless if there's like a ton of people, it still feels like you're 1v1ing each person. And then when you're fighting a group of people, you're just fighting one kind of sectioned off at points. So that was actually when the more I play it, I'm like, this is actually really smart. So I'm not getting swarmed because in a lot of FromSoft games, you'll just have four guys just hit you at the same time and you just instantly die. You know, not in the later ones, but in the original titles, it's just like, oh well, like, there's four of them and they're just gonna all stab me and I'm dead. But in this one, it's just like, no, 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 I'm fighting one, and then I can actively look at like the other one trying to hit, and I can react correctly and switch between. So you feel like one of those action kung fu movies or like Chinese movies where they're like fighting with their, I don't know what the Chinese sword is, but you know, it feels cool. In terms of like historical games that with the fantasy elements, straight up, I'd say Sekiro is like one of my favorites. So yeah, visual art directions, not the greatest thing in the world, but solid story characters. For a FromSoft game, very straightforward, interesting. You know, learning about how you as a ninja get to stuff. It's not the most fascinating thing ever. I don't really play this game for the story, but still, it's like serviceable and it's good. It's not amazing, but it's good. Music and sound design. Music is like okay, it's good. Sound design, mwah. And gameplay. Gameplay is the reason why this game is a masterpiece. You could go into it again, just like a quick TLDR. Combat is incredibly fun. Paper scissors rock sort of mechanics makes you really hyper focus on what the enemy animations are doing, so you feel like you're actually in a combat situation. If you lose your cool, you die. So you learn actually how to keep your cool, breathe, and like fight. And once you beat that thing that's been killing you, the level of visceral satisfaction is immense, because this is not a game where you can just upgrade up and get past everything by one shotting it. No, you actually have to learn the game mechanics. It's a reason why a lot of people hate this game and they never get past it. But once you embrace it, you're in for a fun time. It had some of the best like fights because of those mechanics in any FromSoft game, hands down. And even the mini bosses are actually incredibly fun interactions. You have a choice, like you can death blow them immediately in stealth so that you halve their HP, or you can fight them with 2 HP. Like, yeah, it's a rhythm game, fighting game, a whole like and samurai ninja game, stealth, all put into one, and you get to fight mythical creatures using cool ninja shinobi tools with candy and so yeah, 10 out of 10 game for me. 11 out of 10 game for me. One of my favorites. Top 10 favorite games of all time. Does it have flaws? Yes. Stealth is kind of like redundant. AI is kind of stupid. Cameras usually will kill you a lot of the time. Dragon Rod is a fucking dumb mechanic and I do not like it. You have to farm heavily sometimes just to actually use some of the cool aspects of the fucking game. And the fact that your cool items and your cool weapons and stuff like that need paper like currency that you have to gather, it doesn't recharge like an Estus flask, is kind of dumb. But that's my opinion. Anyways, thank you guys for trying out and listening to my review. This is actually my first take because I realize it is zero effort game reviews. I really don't give a shit. I played the game. I finished it. I loved it. I reviewed it. That was the entire point of me making this YouTube. Not to get stressed. So yeah. Thank you for watching. Hope you guys have a good one. Mwah.